Hello everyone, I hope that you are staying safe and healthy during the interesting times. But I wanted to take today, because I'm here at the school doing some stuff, I want to take today to talk about something I've not talked about on the channel before, which is the rapier. Now, I'm not going to go into detail about, rapiers can cut, rapiers are not light, etc., because you can hear that from other sources. Instead, what I wanted to talk about is something that I feel doesn't get enough attention, which is the posture, at least that the Italian rapier gives us. So, what am I talking about? When I talk about posture, I'm really talking about the guard, or posta, if you wanted to give it, though they never really refer to it in the same way. But you essentially have two stances, if you will, and each one has four guards. And the guards are relatively simplistic compared to the more varied guards of other systems. Not quite as, actually, even less simplistic than backsword, because there are just four of them. So, firstly, let's talk about the guards themselves, because they're relatively universal. They are, and apologies for my Italian, but prima, which is with the knuckles up, held above me, sword is presented outward. This is the position that you would draw to, so it's pretty much always going to be used. Do you fight out of it? Yes, here and there, and I in particular am known for a particular set of little tricks that I like to do out of it. But in general, prima is not going to be that common of a position to take. So, prima, which means one, essentially. Secunda. So, secunda is when my nails are down, the back of my hand is up, and I am not holding it out away from me. It should be not outside of my own body, so about there. And it is flat horizontal, so it's not here, it's about there. Though, they do mention terza secunda and later terza quarta, so there is some overlap, but in general, secunda is going to be here. Then we move on into terza. Terza is 3, it's straight up and straight down. Usually, all of your plays are going to begin in terza because at the moment, I can easily go to either line and I'm not going to have to travel the whole way across. So terza is about here. And finally, quarta. Now, quarta is the opposite of secunda, nails up and flat horizontal. As a right-handed fencer against another right-handed fencer, or even lefty against lefty, quarta is going to be your main one you use. Okay? So, inside and outside lines. The inside being toward my core, that means that if I am lunging against someone else's inside, I want to use my own inside, in which case I would be turning into quarta to execute my lunge. Versus if I was lunging on my outside, this usually happens when I fight left-handers, or if I am fighting left-handed, then I often have to turn into secunda to keep myself secure. So, those are the four basic guards, and there are others depending upon your system. So Capoferro, for example, mentions, even though he hates secunda and prima, but Capoferro is a whole different thing. Capoferro mentions turning into terza secunda specifically, kind of a medium ground, not having to turn all the way to make the move work. Alfieri is rather, I don't want to say famous, but he talks quite a lot about his perfect position, which is right between quarta and terza, which is right about here, which is, its name is escaping me for some reason. But essentially, it's right about there, right? Which, it does have its advantages, but it's not going to miraculously make you an amazing fencer. It's just, it's a tool. If you know how to use it, then awesome. If you've never used it, but are also still quite competent, you won't have any problems. So, that's the general overview of the guards. So now let's talk about the stances, which is where things get a lot more important, and where I'll go into a little more detail about how to form the guards. So the stances. You have two stances. You have rearwards and forward stance. Now, for the forward stance, which is the one I'm going to go on first, it's not as commonly seen. Those that can do it, it has great advantage, but usually it's not very commonly seen because it is hard, and it really mostly appears in Fabris. Now, Fabris is kind of the granddaddy of all Italian rapier, if you aren't aware of him. He's the Liechtenauer to the Italian rapier, the rabbit hole. Anyway, he shows positions here, okay? Which is very similar to the hinge tip position that I would take if I was doing 133 or something along those lines. But the idea behind the forward stance is that I'm going to have my feet decently close together, closer than I do with any other stance for sure. My right foot is going to be at about, my left foot is going to be about a 45-degree angle, my right leg is going to be not necessarily locked, but relatively straight, and I'm kicking my hips back, keeping my back straight, so that way all of my weight is suspended right here, okay? Kind of puts me into this little C shape. Now, you might wonder, why the heck would you stand that way? Reason being that it's taking all of my internal organs and moving them back away from you. It's allowing my arms to become quite light and reach much further than they normally do. And the only thing that you can really target super easily is my face, which is good because as you can see when I hold my guard extended, that's about the same size as my head from your perspective. It's very easy to keep a small line secure. So when I fold into my outside guard, sorry, not my outside guard, well, yes, my outside guard, but my forward stance, here I am, I'm quite protected. You'll notice all of my guards are much more extended usually, and my hand is very close to my face. So that's the forward stance. Like I said, most people don't take it, and that's okay, because that's not what I wanted to focus on right now. I wanted to talk about the rear stance, the one that most people take, or are trying to take, what it does for you specifically, and why it has all the parts it does. So, let's first form our rearward stance. So, if you are right at hand, you will stand with your right toe facing forward. I like to have the heels in line with each other in regards to the front foot, so my left heel is behind my right heel, as opposed to my right heel being behind my left heel. So I'm here, I'm standing in a line. I like to take 2 solid shoe lengths forward, and then half a shoe length out to the left. Now, I am going to back weight myself, but I'm not just going to back weight myself. I am going to, if I turn this way, take my back toe and point it about a 45 off that direction. That's one of the reasons I really like to take this offline step, is because if I have my feet in line, this becomes a little unbalanced. That little half step out to the side, I'm just back weighting myself on the corner. Now the reason that I'm turning my toe backwards is that way I can take more weight onto my knee, right? If my toe is not turned back and I put myself back here, you notice how my hip starts to go outside of my leg. When I'm in the forward stance, that's okay. But because I'm going to be charging up into the rear stance, I need it to be able to take all this weight because I'm going to be here, okay? Now, my front leg is not locked, even though it is relatively straight, but my hips are open right now. I'm not letting them be closed off. In fact, I'm opening them even a little more because I take my hip here, I'm going to retract it back. This has the effect of pulling all of my, squishy important bits far away from where the swords are going to be. It also chambers me for my lunge, but we'll come back to that in a moment. So now I'm here, I'm going to put my arm 1 palmo, which is that distance, out away from my chest, so it's here. I want to make sure that my guard is in line with my hand. It should be natural, sitting there. It shouldn't be up like this or anything like that. My wrist needs to be in line with my forearm, and my elbow is in turn in line with my ribs. So I'm here. Now as for my left hand, it can be a couple different places. It can be up here, defending my face here. It can also be a little lower. Doesn't particularly matter. I've even seen some people fence it on the hip. But in general, you want it here, where it can do something. Okay? And it's recommended that that also be 1 palm away from your chin. Okay? Now as for palm forward or palm back, doesn't particularly matter. It's whatever works for you. So this is my rearward stance. Once I'm here, what I'm really chambered up to do is to extend. I can lean my body forward a little bit if I need to, but I extend and I power off of all of the muscle that I've engaged here to shoot myself forward into my good lunge. Now, during that lunge, there's some very important things that happen. Number 1, because my arm is not held extended, I can extend it, and while I'm extending it, I can intercept whatever it is that the person might be throwing at me. This is how you achieve things like counter lunges, etc., attacking into someone's attack. Number 2, because all my weight is back, I can allow my toe to do little accrescires, which is an advancing step with just my front foot. I like to think of it like a big tentacle, like a sniffer. It's kind of working its way into distance, and it's keeping me safe, right? At any point, I can just withdraw it. If someone cuts for my leg, because I am so back weighted, this is completely weightless. I can fold it, pull it back, what have you. Now, because everything is chambered right here and my toes going backwards, when I lunge, if you look at my back foot, it uses the entirety of the foot to push back. If you watch some sport fencing videos, not to harp on sport fencers, but they're playing a game, when they lunge, you'll often see, this hurts so much to do, this stuff happen. That's because they're just lunging for reach as opposed to lunging to a set point. And that's an important difference. Because a lot of times, if I tell you to reach out and go for something, people will overextend with no thought of recovery, which to be fair, they're following my instructions. But this is a system, all fencing systems should be, you attack with the intent that every position you end up in, you can recover back smoothly to where you began from. So, by turning my foot backwards, when I lunge, what's happening is, if we imagine this is my pinky toe, it's being pushed with the ball of my foot, and it's all digging into the ground like that. So it's one solid piece, and I can take my weight again, and it won't come up. I've never had my foot come up as long as I make sure my toe is going backward, no matter how far I lunge even. Now, Capofero, I'm talking about Capofero a lot today. He gives the advice of you're allowed to put your knee over your toe. Let's discuss that a little bit. So, strictly speaking, if I've been practicing for a while, there's nothing wrong with this. I mean, this is perfectly supported. My knee is not in danger, my toe is not going to roll, my ankle's not going to roll, I'm at full extension here. Nothing is wrong with this position. I can even do a particularly far-reaching lunge with it. Right? That's a very deep lunge. However, the ability to actually do that comes down to your flexibility and your balance. I've been lunging for quite a while and I still suck at it. What I see a lot of times is people have talked about the idea of the Renaissance lunge. Now this is a bit of a rabbit hole, so bear with me. And I'm not trying to call out anyone specifically, but I don't want anyone's knees breaking. So, the Renaissance lunge, as it's been proposed, is the idea of lunging like this. So my heel is up, my toe is on, my ball of my foot is on the ground, so I can, in theory, take more weight like this and get a little more reach. Don't do this. Please, God. Right? All this is going to lead to is your knee is going to go to the ground and this is going to hyperextend. The reason that that doesn't work is because if you're properly throwing yourself forward, you're putting all of your weight onto a very small area that you're then purposefully overextending beyond, and there is no way that you'll be able to step past it. It's okay for us to do things like that physically when, for example, we are transferring our weight onto something else, because we can go forward again. But this is not what we're doing. We're going to a set point for max reach and then coming back. It's just not going to lead to good things. So, if we're not doing that, why is letting our knee go over our toe okay in some situations? Because one, when you first start out, you're not going to be able to do it. Work on your lunge as it is, and then eventually you'll be able to, thanks to your hip flexors being a little bit more open, you'll be able to go a little further and your knee may go over your toe. But always keep your entire front foot on the ground, okay? That way, if your knee does go over your toe, like I just showed, so even if I do the biggest lunge I'm physically capable of, it's just going to stop when I feel the strain there. I can't go any further than this. I can lean a little bit, but since I was reaching, I'm fine. Because if you're lunging short, that you'll have this happen. So make sure that you are reaching out for your target with your whole body and not lunging short for the idea of perceived reach through your knee going over your toe. Because all that's going to lead to is you've now lunged short and then hurt yourself trying to lunge the same distance you would have normally. So, rambliness aside, you can tell I've been quarantined for too long. Let's talk a little bit about how to execute the lunge and how to recover from the lunge, because you need to train both equally. In fact, I argue that more people should probably focus on their recovery than they should on their initial lunge, at least if you've been practicing for a little bit. So, the order for firing is, it's a 4-part move. Extend, lunge, recover, relax. The reason we do it in that exact order is because when I extend, I'm taking control of my opponent's sword. When I lunge, I am trying to strike my opponent. When I recover, I am leaving distance. Either I have not struck my opponent or I have and I am getting out of the way. And I keep my sword out until I am fully secure. Then I relax it. Because if I immediately bring this back, this makes everything weak again. He will hit me on my recovery. It's just not a good idea. Versus if I recover and my arm is still extended, one, that will make my parry better, and my follow-up riposte will be very good. So, let's talk about some even finer points with visual aid. So here I am. I'm back here, I'm set, I'm ready, I'm in terza. All of my weight is currently chambered on one foot. I extend, and you will also see sometimes I'll purposely lean my body into it. This is okay. It's not a terrible thing to do. Just requires practice. It may not work for you, it may work for you. Who knows? But extend. I pick up my front foot. I am shooting myself forward via all of this stored energy. Okay? I am not falling into it. I'm just lifting my foot and shoving myself forward all via my back leg. Now, the arm. That's the bit everyone's kind of curious about. Do you throw it back? Do you pull it up? Do you leave it where it is? Do you cast it down? You can do any of those. They're all fine. Sometimes I'll keep my hand up. Sometimes I'll flare my hand back. Sometimes I'll cast it like this. Sometimes I cast it like this. That's all fine. The only thing you don't want to do is this. What is this? That is me throwing it to the side, which as you can see affects where my torso is turning. That throws off my balance. Casting it down or up doesn't, because I'm in a linear plane. There is one other thing you don't want to do with your arm, which is just leave it hanging here. It doesn't do anything for you. Make it do something and train your body to always have both limbs active. It'll be very important later down the line. So now I'm here. I have lunge. Life is great and grand and wonderful. Boom. To recover, you'll notice that all of my weight has shifted onto my front foot. I'm going to dig with my toes into the ground, and I'm going to force my hip backward here. Now, oftentimes when I recover, I find myself in a slightly narrower version of the rearward stance. That's a-okay. You're not going to end up in the perfect stance each time. You could work toward it. I'm not going to. But once I'm here, my arm is still extended, I recover. So when you're practicing your lunges, which you have plenty of time to do so, lunge, make sure you're solid there, then recover, see what has changed in your stance. If you're off balance on your recovery, you're probably extending to the side, your arms are doing something funky, or you may even be curling in. Because if you leave yourself extended, you get a little bit extra balance. If you curl in, it starts to throw things off. But you want to treat it as a smooth 1, 2, 3, 4 sort of motion. So I will do some now for fun. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Make sense? You want them to be as consistent as you can get, but you don't have to take it too super fast. I'm not even throwing that much energy into it. I'm just making sure that the right muscles are engaging to do the right job. Because that's really what all this practice is about, is making sure that your body's doing the right thing, and then over time, you'll get the speed, etc. that you need. But that's not our only lunge. There is another lunge, which is the outside lunge. So this lunge is a bit of a strange one. It's not necessarily something that's super talked about in the sources, but I have noticed a difference in lunges as I've been looking through the books. And I'm not claiming to have discovered this, but oftentimes when I lunge on the outside, so going into secunda, I will turn my body in a slightly different way than I do normally. So if I lunge to the inside, it'll be this sort of position. If I lunge to the outside, it'll be this sort of position. So what's happening here? What's happening is that because I need to put force into a place where my body is not, I have to go away from my core, I'm letting my core come with me. I'm curling it in, bringing this shoulder forward, which gives me more stability here. Is this wrong? No, not at all. It works, and I can guarantee it works. Is it historical? Yes, I believe so. Because there are depictions of people lunging this way, both in quarta and in secunda. The lunge's depiction varies from source to source. I have found one that matched this exactly. That's where I got the idea. And it works really, really well. So if you happen to find that your lunges into secunda are weak, then what I'd recommend is you give this a try. So let's see how it works. So, you form your rearward stance the same way you would normally. From here, when I extend, everything's the same, but when I go to lunge, I am going to let this hip come forward a little bit and turn into it. This is still the same functional lunge. It's just I'm letting this hip turn a tiny bit, so I'm more square to my opponent, which gives me more pressure here. Then when I recover, everything is still the same. I let my hip come back, and back here. Nothing really changes. It's just I'm choosing to let my hip go forward. And you can also do that with the lunge on the inside. Try it, see if it works for you. I recommend both, and I recommend not getting stuck to one or the other. So sometimes when I lunge, sometimes when I lunge into secunda, I won't do this. Reason being is to keep it varied up. Sometimes to my detriment, sometimes that's to my success. We're all training here. Our lives are not actually on the line. We can work for sake of variety. All right, so that's our lunge in secunda, that's our lunge in terza, that's our lunge in quarta. What about prima? How do you lunge in prima? You can, in fact, lunge in prima. It's usually going to be a slightly shorter lunge, just by nature. Most times because if you're lunging into prima, you've probably used your offhand to defend yourself, in which case they're kind of within your own range. So let me go over how to do that. So one of my favorite tricks from prima, and I'm so bad for this, but I come up into prima, and when they lunge at my opening, I parry with my hand, and I lunge. That's really all it is. It's a very easy trick to do. It's one I frankly use too much, but no one stopped me. As you can see, it looks a little bit like my outside lunge. Nothing really changes. The trick with it is kind of just to leave your prima where it is. Don't try to alter it. You can certainly move down into another guard, so you could pop from prima into secunda, for example, if you want a little bit more reach. But in general, most times I find that if I am here in prima and someone attacks me, it usually ends up just like that. There's a little bit of wrist extension, but beyond that, my arm doesn't really move all that much. And everything's great. So, that is how, according to the way I train, and I haven't hurt myself yet, that is how, according to the way I train, you should execute your lunges and how you should practice your lunges. It's the inside lunge, the outside lunge, and the lunge in prima for funsies. Now, the last question that you might have is, should I lunge on both sides? Yes. Now, if you don't want to train with the rapier in your other hand, one, why? But here's the main reason you should train lunging on the other side. Because when you use a spear, you're going to be lunging with your left foot. That's not something a lot of people think about, but if you are right-handed, if you're going to be using a spear, you'll want to be standing this way, which means that now all of my attacks are going to be with my left lunge. So, definitely make sure to train both sides. I recommend and advocate you train them with the sword, because it's just some extra practice anyway. We'll give you a further understanding of the differences. It's also good to look at things from the lefty's perspective, because rapier especially has a lot of lefties in it, which is a good thing. I like more lefties. But, either way, that is how to form your lunge and how to execute it. Hopefully that's been helpful. Be sure to stay healthy out there, folks. And we'll go over some more techniques another time.